Yeah, we're live. 10:50. Today we are going to talk about stroker science. We're going to look specifically. The thumbnail that I have up is actually I don't know if the photo is the 302 or the 347, because honestly they look identical because we ran them with the same things. So the short block obviously is different. Excuse me. But we ran them with the same combination of heads, cam, and intake manifold, and we also ran a supercharger, and then we upgraded them to see what they would do. But along the way, for me the most interesting test, and this is oftentimes the case, it's cool to have a modified motor that has a set of airflow research heads and a good cam and an intake manifold, and then you put a blower on it like a Vortec or Torque Storm or whatever. In this case, it was a Vortec. That's all cool. It's cool to do that stuff, and you may make big power. Understandably so. You should. You get a 347 with like airflow research heads and a big cam in it and the right intake manifold. You can make 450 or more NA, and then you add boost 600-700 horsepower. Not a problem at all. Excuse me. But the test that I think is really cool is not the big power thing. The test I think is cool is, and this is what I want to talk about today, is when we ran the stock 302 we ran it with the stock camshaft, stock HO camshaft, the E7TE head stock. They did have valve springs on them because we were going to run a camshaft in it. And then we didn't run it with the HO intake manifold. We ran the GT40 intake manifold, minor upgrade, 10 or 12 horsepower, whatever, from the HO manifold. Milo. But the cool thing that we did in the test that I want to talk about is that we ran that same stuff on the 347. So all we did was take that stuff off, slide the 347 underneath there. And then that stuff, which we know is restrictive even on a 302. So to give you an idea, on the 302 in that configuration with the GT40 intake manifold on it and probably headers, it made like 275 horsepower and 320 something foot-pounds of torque. So that's pretty normal. I've run lots of these, and that's kind of where they would be. And then we added the 347 short block, and then it made like 305 or 306 horsepower and 390 foot-pounds of torque. So it made a little bit more power, and a good bit more torque. So it made like 70 more foot-pounds of torque. And it only made about 30 more horsepower. And the reason for this, there are a couple, but we'll focus on the cylinder heads. So the cylinder heads are E7TE heads. They're stock. We know that they flow, 155 or 160 CFM, but the 160 CFM is only that above where the lift range is of the stock camshaft. So these things are 150 CFM, in the range that we would be using, which if we use our normal formula of 2 horsepower per peak CFM, gives us an idea, hey, these things could support 300 horsepower, which we know that they already did. In fact, with these heads, we've made as much as 385 horsepower on a bigger 392 with a big camshaft in it, with a good intake manifold, more displacement, more compression, all of that stuff. Because what's happening is when we flow these heads, we flow them at 28 inches, but a stroker is going to draw more than what that is. So what would happen is the flow rate would artificially go up. But on this motor, if we use that as a rough idea, I want to show you why this thing has bigger torque gains than it does horsepower gains. And it's because of this limitation. The cylinder heads are one thing. Also, we have a limitation in camshaft. We don't have very much camshaft in it. We also have a limitation in intake manifold. And so all of these things combine to restrict. But if we look at the cylinder head stuff and we look at the amount of airflow that's necessary to make a given amount of power, we see why this is happening. So to give you an idea, if we look at the horsepower number on the 302, at 2,500 RPM, it made 144. Which is 303 foot-pounds. At 3,000, it made 177, which is 310 foot-pounds. At 3,500, it made 213, 320 foot-pounds. At 4,000, 245 and 321. At 4,500, 265 and 309. at 5,274, which is up near where the power peak is, and 288 foot-pounds at 5,500, 276, and 264. And in this instance, we didn't run it to 6,000 RPM. By contrast, the 347, the lowest that we ran it was 3,500 RPM. We could speculate at 3,000. It'd be about 400 foot-pounds of torque at 3,000 RPM. But at 3,500, it made 260 horsepower, which was up 47 horsepower at 3,500 compared to the 302. At 4,000, it was 288 foot-pounds, which is 307, or 288 horsepower, which was 378 foot-pounds. Again, it's up over 40 horsepower, 43 horsepower. At 4,500, it was 305 horsepower, so it was up again about 40 horsepower, 356 foot-pounds. And at 5,000, it was 302 versus 274. So now we're looking at it, it's only up about 26 horsepower. And at 5,500, it's 292 versus 276. So it's not even up 20 horsepower. And what's happening is, if we look at, we said our cylinder heads flow 150 CFM and they'll support 300 horsepower. Well, anything below that level, like back when we were making, at 3,500 RPM, when the 347 was making 260 horsepower, those heads will support that power level very easily. That's why we see the big horsepower gains there, because it has enough of what it needs to support the power level there. It has enough head flow, basically. It says, hey, look, I can support 300 horsepower. Well, good. We can make horsepower there. We don't have enough of the other things to make more horsepower than this, but we're showing good gains there because we have head flow to support that power level on the bigger motor. Same thing at 4,000 RPM. We're only at 288 horsepower. Hey, I've got 300 CFM cylinder or 300 horsepower cylinder heads on it. We have enough to support there. And then at 4,500, things actually start to go away. I have enough to support that just basically. And this is why when we put a stroker motor, when we restrict a stroker motor, so if we take the stock stuff off of a 302 in this case and do it and put it a 347, that's why these things become restrictive. And they become more restrictive with more RPM. Because one of the things that a lot of guys don't realize is as you go up in engine speed, the airflow that's processed through the motor goes up. And it does that regardless of where you have the horsepower peak. So let's say we had a mild combination and like this kind of thing, we made peak power at 5,500 RPM. Okay. That's where the horsepower peak is. That's where it's making the most power at 5,500 RPM. If we rev that motor to 6,000 and we have an air hat on it, the airflow of the motor is still going up from 5,500 to 6,000, despite the fact that the peak power or the power went down. So the airflow goes up with engine speed. So it continues to go up. So the motor is still processing air. It's just not making power. It doesn't have a very good, the brake specific air consumption number goes down with RPM as we go past the horsepower peak. So what we need is obviously, greater RPM. We need more head flow, more power. We need more airflow, more displacement. We need more airflow. And that's why these things become restrictive. And we could make the same case about the fairly mild stock camshaft and certainly about the GT40 intake manifold. It's a long runner design. It has a limited amount of flow. I can't remember now. It's been so long since I looked at the airflow data of a GT40 intake manifold. I'd like to compare that to the cylinder head to see just from a flow standpoint, which one of those was more or less restrictive. And then, on the GT40 intake manifold, we also have to consider runner length. So the runner length on a 302, that manifold is going to be able to run a little bit more engine speed and make peak power at a little bit higher engine speed on a 302 than it will on a 347. And we saw that. But did we also see that because of the restriction of the other two things, of the head flow? Let me know in the comments, of the head flow and of the camshaft, both of which are basically made, milder or in our case on the head flow side, more restrictive because of the displacement. So this is, and we talked about this on another live feed. Well, when we were talking about the guys from one of the magazines took a 305 and took that off and either put a 347 or some kind of stroker underneath it. And it basically with the tune port stuff, and this would be the same kind of thing as we're doing here on the tune port stuff. And it basically made very, very similar peak power. It just added a lot of torque. And this is exactly what this thing did. we see big torque gains. We see, like I said, 70 foot-pounds of torque. Okay, those are good gains. And you would feel that, stomping on the gas, particularly if you had a stock converter, or even if you had a 5-speed, having, another 70 or 80 or 90 foot-pounds of torque down low would definitely be beneficial, and it would feel great. It would just run out of steam as you went up top, because those things would become more and more restrictive on the stroker. Let's see. What do you guys got going on today? Brian, man, what's up? Thank you very much. But I'm going to scroll back here and see. Alan, good morning from, is that Atlas? Is that Arizona or is that Australia? Either one, good. Because the Australia has, Arizona has diamondback rattlesnakes and coral snakes and Gila monsters. And Arizona has every other, or Australia has every other venomous thing known to man. Everything wants to bite you, stab you, or stick you. Richard, you asked about how many degrees we were swinging the cam in my 394. 5 degrees advanced. Okay, so that you're moving it, you have enough piston to valve clearance to move that thing at wide open throttle anyway by 5 degrees, right? Okay. And do you have limiters on that? Or are you just doing that like physical limiters on the gear? Or are you just doing that with the controller? I would think with more spring rate and stuff that there would be mechanical limiters on this too. Todd, what's going on? 4 to 8 degrees per pound of boost NA. Tyler, what's going on? 1 pound of boost has a slight restriction. It's probably the 6.4 liter intake, which is fine due to it being a street truck. Where are you seeing a restriction? Are you seeing a restriction from the turbo into the intake manifold? So is it an intercooler thing or something? Richard, I saw a BTR stage 4 cam in one of your videos that had really good torque. I got 799 heads with flat top pistons. Do I have enough piston to valve clearance? Yeah, that cam fits. That cam fit in our 5.3 liter L33 that had 799 heads and had flat top pistons. Arizona again, nothing but good. I've been to Arizona a lot. I used to work there. I love my small block Chevy 383 ported Holly Stealth Ram AFR 195. That's a good combination. Snyder 242, 248. So that thing probably makes good power. Solid roller went 1060s, 986. So when 1068 at 128 on the motor, that's good. That's making good power. Curious, did you ever do a Big Bang test on the 3800 and a Coyote? No, on the Coyote, and not yet on the 3800. Any testing on a Blueprint 4-bolt block? We've done 1,000 horsepower stuff on there. If you're talking about a 4-bolt small block Chevy, we've done 1,000 horsepower stuff on that on Chad's motor. Chad had one of a power adder. I think his was a power adder 400, I think. And he and Daphne, when she was alive, ran a bunch of nitrous drag strip stuff on it and drove the car around everywhere for thousands of miles. And then we put a Pro Charger on it, an F1A94, when we did that fastest car TV show, and we ran it on the dyno at like 1,000. Small block Ford 347. Oh, does Blueprint have a 4-bolt block? Trying to think if we've ran any of their Ford stuff on a 347. I'd have to go back and look. I remember I thought that we did some 408 stuff of theirs, but I don't remember doing a Blueprint 347. I don't think we did. Small block Ford, stroker. We did Dart stuff. Yeah, I don't think we did. I don't think I did a Blueprint 347. Pretty new. Yeah, I haven't done anything on those. But I've had good luck with all of the other stuff that they've done. And I think that they do their own casting. So they do they do a pretty good job. Hopefully they would have looked at the Dart, and maybe they were doing the Ford racing ones. I don't know who was doing those for them, but the Sportsman blocks and the A4 blocks and all, hopefully they would have, and the Boss blocks, that they would have looked at all of those and learned where you want material. Is Ford Racing or whatever their name is now, are they still selling the good blocks, Sportsman blocks or 4-bolt blocks? We've used the Dart stuff a lot, and that seems to work pretty well. I know that we've done 4-digit power level stuff on the Dart blocks. I've run both their 347s and we did a 363, which I liked a lot. So it was a 4125 bore block, and then a 3400 stroke, and that did good. Stroker stuff, and then I think on this, what do we end up doing? We put heads, cam, and intake manifold on the 347. And I want to see how much it made. $666 at 6,300. It's still climbing pretty hard. Looked like we were kind of running. Oh yeah, that was climbing hard. Which boost was that? And that was only like at 8 pounds. It's amazing. You get a good, powerful combination, and then you add boost to it, and all the magic happens. What's the best engine in your opinion for reliability through modding and power gains? There is no best. Is there an advantage to a 331 to a 347? Some guys, I think, will tell you that the shorter stroke, the 3250 stroke, is doesn't have enough rod, or doesn't have as much rod angularity to it, and so it has a better rod ratio or something like that. I think a guy worrying about whether it's going to last 200,000 miles versus 150,000 miles or whatever that number would be, I don't know of anybody that has them that long where they'd have to worry about something like that. The 347 is definitely going to make more power because it's bigger. Horrible 4800 stall converter, 18% slip on the top end. Used to go through the traps at 7500. That's a lot of slip. Is that converter slip? Like, how do you tighten that up? That would kill me if we were running at Bonneville and if we had 18% converter slip, and then if there was tire slip also. We don't have almost any tire slip on the front wheel drive stuff, which is fantastic. The math and the gearing and the speed and all that stuff and the RPM all calculate almost exactly. So it'd make me mad if I was like, okay, look, this thing's going to go 208 miles an hour at, like, on the Honda at, I don't know, let's say 8,000 RPM, whatever the number is. And then we calculate it and go, oh no, that was nowhere near that. I'm like, oh, no, that can't be. Because the tire spinning. A lot of the rear wheel drive guys, though, at Bonneville, they have tire slip. But ours mathed out really, really close. We don't have any converter to worry about, though. We have a manual transmission. And we're not trying to make a million horsepower either. We're only, it's like 500 or something. 500-ish on a front wheel drive car. It's nothing. It's all like easy peasy. I've been following on Facebook. There's a guy that I've been following that's doing a Metro that he's turbocharging and stuff. I think he just hurt a piston or two ringland, and he didn't take it apart to put ring gap in. It surprised me that he was going to boost it that high and then not do that. I think now he's taking out the NA pistons, I think now, and putting in the turbo stuff from the Sprint or Firefly or any of those. But he's doing that, and then I hope that he puts more ring gap in it too to make it work. I've got my so shout out to the guys at Brian Tooley Racing and Airflow and all those guys for helping support the channel, but also to the Haltech guys. I've got their stuff, and I'm going to bring it down with me and try to get some stuff done on. We want to put their Rebel setup on an LS just so I can run it and see what's going on. I might do a collaboration with somebody on some YouTube stuff, which would be fun. If that happens, we'll let you guys know about what's going on there. A collab. Arizona. Macedonia. How many degrees were swinging the cam at my 394, 6.4 liter, 11.5 to 1. Brian, man, you said 48 degrees. Are you saying 48 degrees per pound of boost NA? So I don't understand what that statement is. 1 pound of boost has a slight restriction. It's probably the 6.4 liter intake manifold. Yeah, I'm not getting all that. Are you talking about changing the ignition timing per pound of boost? Are you talking about changing the cam timing per pound of boost? Am I just getting the wrong thing there? What's going on? Don't buy a Pep Boys brand converter. We got ours from a local auto parts store for my truck. You actually buy something from Yank or somebody that knows what you're doing. Do Pep Boys have like high stall converters? Can you actually get stuff like that from them? Air-to-air intercoolers. What, did you just want to say that, or did you have a question about it? Like, what's the deal? I've done lots of testing with air-to-air intercoolers. I'd like to hear about restrictions in eBay units. You have to tell me an eBay intercooler is not really a thing. I mean, you could go get intercoolers that you buy from people that have eBay stores, but there's a huge variety of different sizes and manufacturers and flow rates and tank designs and all of these things from these different intercooler manufacturers. So you'd have to be specific about the ones that you're talking about. An eBay intercooler, they're not all the same any more than all the different manufacturers that are not eBay things are all the same. They're not. So we'd have to be specific about the intercoolers. I have tested different size intercoolers and shown what happens there. I did the ProCharger ones, and we stepped up to the bigger size intercooler, and there was less restriction, and so there's more boost in the manifold, and it made more power. It did all the things that we kind of expected. I was young and only knew engines, not how to put it to the ground. So did Pep Boys have a converter, like high stall converters? I don't think I've ever ordered anything like that from them. The inlet on the tank, specifically like center versus end, 90 degrees. So you want to see different tank styles with the same core, or what? I would almost like to see that maybe on a flow bench or something. To use pressure regulators and increase fuel pressure per psi of boost on your turbo applications. Sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. On the dyno, we have an aeromotive adjustable fuel pressure regulator that naturally has a diaphragm in it and it's boost referenced. Sometimes we boost reference it and sometimes we don't. It depends on what power level we're running and what size injector we're running. Sometimes we don't have to do that so that the fuel pressure goes up with boost. If you do that, you have more fuel flow potential if you do that, because fuel flow is a delta thing. So if you have 45 or let's say 60 pounds of fuel pressure on an LS, 58 pounds, and you have 10 pounds of boost, you really are only giving that fuel injector 48 pounds of fuel pressure because it's having to flow against 10 psi. So if you jack the fuel pressure up in relation to boost, you'll always have this 58 psi. So the flow rate of the injector will continue to be correct. Sometimes we have 1,000 horsepower worth of injector flow, and we're only running it at 600 horsepower. So the fact that we're losing the 10 psi of fuel pressure doesn't do anything. We just add pulse width and we're there. It's not a big deal. Sometimes we do that if we want to get everything out of the injector. Let's say we're up near, let's say we're making 900 or 950. We have 1,000 horsepower with injector. Then we'll do that. It's not a bad idea to do that. And it's not a bad idea to do that when you have big injectors, because the reverse is also true. If you have it boost referenced, you also have it vacuum referenced. So it will pull fuel pressure away. It just won't be just a static thing. It will pull fuel pressure away when you're not under boost, like under idle and cruise. And then it will make the injector seem like it's smaller when you need less fuel. And then so that helps sometimes on really big injectors that don't want to run down at like, a low pulse width. That way it will help you trim some of the fuel away. I know that some of the Porsche 996 and 997 intercoolers perform 30 horsepower better with revised tanks on the same intercoolers. So then the boost pressure must be going up, right, when they do that? So you've increased the flow rate of the core. Did you see the engine power 305 versus 302 comparison? I haven't seen the absolute results of that. I saw that they were doing it, and I think it's cool because I think it's cool when somebody does something that I did. That's awesome. Any experience on how the SV170s work out? I don't know. If those are cylinder heads, I don't think I've tested those. They did back in 2004. I think it was Reebok's B&M stuff. They used to have a whole wall of shift kits and shifters and converters. Okay, cool. I remember when they started doing aftermarket stuff, and then you could go get performance intake manifolds and air intakes and stuff like that. Boost goes up with the same tune. Okay. So if we were to monitor pressure, Dan, before the intercooler and after the intercooler, we would have seen that change, right? When on the intercooler. And if you improve the flow rate of the intercooler, then that's good. And as long as you don't reduce the cooling, that's also good. So if it's just a tank design thing, that can be good. Does the Haltech Rebel have a chance to be easier installed than the Holley ECU? I think it does. But we won't know until I do it. Seems like some of those are placed conveniently, maybe not so efficient. Well, and you have to consider that, because if you make a tank design where you maximize the flow rate of that design, it might not fit anything. I mean, you have to make the intercooler fit where it has to fit. And sometimes that, just like with a radiator, that dictates the inlet and the outlet. So they can't just put them anywhere, because there might be no hole there. You can't get a hose there. It might not come from the turbo there or go back up to the throttle body there. So sometimes, your tank design and the inlet and the outlet position sometimes are dictated by the available space and constraints. I have an L83. I want to build 500 horsepower. Do you have any suggestions? Yeah, talk to the guys at Brian Tooley Racing. They have cams and things that will allow you to do that. When you look at the stock intercooler tanks, you wonder who designed these. But did they, Dan, did they do it for packaging? Did they do it for cost? Did they do it for, ease of construction? They're really flat on the other side of the tank, restricting the flow through half of the core for packaging. Yeah, that's. I mean, look at and this was a long time ago, but look at the original turbo intake manifold, that like flat pancake thing. And they weren't the only ones back then. And look at the intake and exhaust manifold that would have originally come on my draw through non-turbo 85 Omni GLH. Just, it worked. But that's really all you can say. But they quickly redesigned stuff and made things better. Got the 1-piece and the 2-piece and all that, and the 6-piece and the 10-piece McNugget. All that's good. Yeah, Ram Pro. I did some videos with them on stuff that they did, and so what they did was they have tested a bunch of different cams, and they had some that worked with the available piston to valve clearance, and some that they did some piston notching with. And then I think that they also tried maybe some ported heads. I know they tried different intake manifolds, and they tried an MSD intake manifold, which definitely adds peak power, but it also trades power, which is, oftentimes the trade out between the runner length on intake manifolds. So to get the big number, you got to trade the low speed power. And a lot of guys don't want to do that. If my cam sales are any indication, the low buck truck camshaft, people want the power below 5,000 way more than they want the bigger camshaft. The bigger camshaft does make more power. The Truck Plus does make more power, but that low buck truck is hard to beat. The 930s had really crappy intake plumbing all the way through. Porsche only made the original 930s because they needed it for the rules. They never thought they'd sell for the street. It sure was a popular thing back in the street. I mean, we all oohed and awed over a Porsche Turbo. Those were pretty cool. But I always wanted to put on those motors, and they eventually did, longer runner intake manifolds, and then obviously make them bigger than 2.7 liters, and then make them 3 liters, and then 3.3, and do all that stuff. And then did they do 3.6 turbos too? I think they did, right? All of that's better. They were quite successful with their turbo stuff in racing. Michael, stay safe out there, man. If you guys are out there in hurricane country, that's not cool. We want everybody in Florida to stay safe. Hopefully it will not be as bad as they're saying. You're prepped. 3.6 turbos and the special 3. They did do a 3.8 turbo. I thought that I didn't know if they did that because I didn't know how much wall thickness they had in the sleeves or the jugs. Here come the jugs. That's all good stuff. It's funny that when I was talking about the 302 and the 347 earlier, how excited I get about running the stock stuff. Every time, and Brule was the same way. Every time we'd start up like a stock motor with a stock cam, especially if we had an exhaust on it, like we had mufflers on it, we'd start it up and we'd be like, that thing's like not even running. It's not making any noise at all. It's just like, 600 or 700 RPM or whatever, just sitting there at like 22 inches of vacuum, and there's no cam noise, there's no nothing. It's just like just sitting there. You're like, it's like it's not even there, which is awesome. They go longer crank and bigger cylinders. The problem is cooling. Air cooled can't get rid of the heat. Yeah, I remember when they started doing Didn't they start doing water cooled heads first, and then they went to the whole thing? You're having a hurricane party? I want to shoot for 1,000 horsepower on an LS1. It's only got 20,000 miles. Or lifters a concern if I pair it with some higher mileage 243 heads. We run stock lifters on that kind of stuff all the time. That's not an issue for me at all. Particularly if you have the stock lifters and they only have 20,000 miles. Congratulations on an LS1, by the way. If you have an original LS1 that only has 20,000 miles on it, that's pretty good. That's like almost unheard of. But we don't usually take those blocks more than 1,000 horsepower because the block is going to move around. Moby Dick 935 had water-cooled heads and then air-cooled cylinders. Okay. So did they still, on that one, did it still have the big fan on top of it for the block? I think I need, now it makes me want to just go back and look at that stuff and remember it. I just walked down, took a stroll down memory lane on the 924 and 944 turbo stuff because I have that book and that's good stuff. You know, it makes you read through that stuff and you're like, man, I want a 944 turbo S. Still have the upright flat fan on top. Okay. Most of the heat goes up in the head. $959 had water cooled heads and a regular fan to cool the cylinders. I remember seeing one of those. I got to see one of those in person. I didn't get to ride in it, but one of the families that they also had sport quattros. So they brought a 959 and a Boxer and a Testarossa. They brought all those out from Michigan out to the Silver State. And that 959 had to be one of the only ones that was in the States at the time. And it was cool. It was cool to see in person because it was, it was like a alien technology, like a UFO. 959s are 2 millions. Yeah. Isn't Canepa doing like newer versions of those or modernized versions of those or like 600 or 700 horsepower versions of those? Because if you have a 959, you don't want to get worked over by like a regular Porsche guy. Those things are cool. They certainly looked futuristic compared to what was going on at the time. And then that family got into like Audi Sport Quattros, and then they brought an RS 200 that was making like, I don't know, it was more than 700. It was pretty pissed off. Canepa retro refit is $1 million in parts and labor, and you supply a 959. Nice. Yeah, but if you're a 959 guy, the 959 isn't your only car. It's part of your collection, and is a business write-off for for a promotional aspect. Near. Still want the 917 Can-Am car. That would be cool. I would like the Donahue 91730. I just like the paint scheme. As a young guy in 89, a Corvette Club Autocross when a family brought an 87 940 for turbo, expecting to be disappointed power-wise, but it just worked good power and balance. It did. The 944s were really good. They were very well balanced. I remember getting passed by one of those in the Silver State. And the Can-Am car holds 120 gallons. Really, that much of fuel for those Fayetteville to LA runs? Man, that would be expensive, huh? Any Penn-Star tests in your future? Like what? Yeah, any Can-Am car. Certainly, you're right. T is any of the McLarens, any of the weird shadows, any of the Tyrrells, any of those would be cool. The weirder the better. I know that just like a McLaren with an aluminum big block in it was like really, really fast and dominating and did very well. But the six wheel stuff or the chaparral stuff, any of that, all people, the weirder the better. But which Dodge are you talking about? Are you talking about a Hemi? I have lots of Hemi stuff up, and a little bit of 360 stuff, but no other ones. I have a slant six that we're gonna run. Oh, a 3.6 liter V6. Yeah, that's not scheduled. 3.6 and 3 liters. Yeah, and the 2.2, that's right. I forgot about that. I do have that. The 2.2 and 2.5. In Can-Am races, they wouldn't do fuel stops, so they held 600 pounds of fuel and a car that weighs 1,800 pounds. That's a big change. Did they? They would have had to even back then. Did they have the fuel cell like all the way along the bottom side of the car so that it upset the handling the least amount? I mean, having less weight is definitely going to help, but having it compartmentalized so it's not sloshing around and stuff, and so that it's not all in one, like all in the back of the car, all in the front of the car, that would be terrible. Facebook Marketplace has a McLaren Brodix big block for 18,000. Oh, cool. Is it original, like a Reynolds aluminum kind of thing? Fuel cells are on both sides of the driver for side impact safety. Wow. That's scary. Please don't crash. Please don't crash. Please don't crash. But were awesome races to watch, though. They were. That's what Dan was saying. They're literally wrapped around the driver. Should build a burnout car. Looks like it was with the original injection setup. So it'd have been a Hillborn or a Crower or one of those, right? Wish you could fit bigger heads on the 351 Windsor with the stock pistons. Can you just go in and notch them a little bit to put, like an airflow research head or something on there? We did that, and I did a terrible job on that. That was not my best effort. That was on the Big Bang one. A picture of one of the early Porsche race cars where the aluminum fuel tank was the driver's seat. Man, that's awful. It's like when you look at the old Indy cars, like when Rick Mears and those guys are driving Little Owl, you see their feet hanging out there in the nose cone. Yeah, not cool. Not cool at all. When men were men. Rick Mears was my favorite driver back then. I mean, I like watching Little Owl, especially at the Long Beach Grand Prix, Little Owl's playground. But I like Rick Mears because I always thought that he was cool and that he just like went out and did his thing and like, hey, you guys all go race for the lead, do your thing, 15, 20 laps. I'm going to start doing stuff when it matters. Yeah, I mean, he had good cars too, obviously. Was there ever a quad 4 Big Bang? I've never run one of those on the engine dyno. I did lust after one of those. That when I saw the 442 that was in the wrecking yard, I wanted the whole car because one of those would be cool to have. I think I would definitely want a turbo one though. IndyCar switched from gas to methanol, so the cars had to pit for fuel. Yeah, but the side benefit is that with methanol, that you could also make more power. Frankenstein a CT90 just for burnout. So like Ella swapped the CT90. Turbo Quad 4 is an excellent engine for a Fiero. I agree, and so is any of those a K series or the Ecotex. Any of those would be good. Any sort of turbo 4-cylinder is a good idea. Even the turbo Iron Duke, but not as good a choice as any of the other 4-valve deals. But I mean, let's face it, the reason that, because it's easy to get spoiled with all of the stuff that I do on the dyno, but I still remember when reading a story in Automobile magazine about the Starlight Rally, and one of the guys had a Banks turbo Corvette, and 50% more power. It doesn't matter that you're only starting out with 200 or whatever the number is. 50% more power is a huge change in the power output. Because I remember them bragging that this car would go more than 150 miles an hour as a turbocharged Corvette. But it was a turbocharged like L82 Corvette or something. It was not something that was really stellar to begin with. But and I think that's all that they did to it. It's not like they didn't know how to make power. But I remember them talking about that and doing this rally, and I thought, oh, that's really cool. And turbo stuff, add 40 or 50% of power. That's a huge amount. And just say no to the Iron Duke. You can't see methanol flames in the daylight if the driver catches fire. Yeah, that's not good. You have a torque charm supercharger set up for a 4.8 that you want to sell? I don't. I have a supercharger set up for an LS. In fact, I have a twin set up, but not one that I want to sell. The safest place is in the driver's seat for the fuel. The torque charms are good superchargers. The ones that I have are the early ones. And I've only ever made 700 or 750, I think, with those. But they're saying that they make more. I haven't been able to do that. Is that an old Powerdyne company? No, it's not a Powerdyne supercharger because it's not belt driven. And I don't know if they bought I'd have to ask them if they bought the rights to that or something. The cam gear on the Iron Dukes wear out, making it sound like a diesel locomotive. White gas LS. What is white gas? I don't know what that is. You have to educate me. JLo's Garage did a video about a 442. Is it the Quad 4 one? Because I thought I saw that they did one about the Aerotech and all of that stuff. Maybe that's part of it. The 442 was cool. I think it was expensive at the time compared to the other things that were out there. I wanted to do an M90, but I don't know if it's good. The M90 on a 4.8 it can be a good choice. It's a lot though, because it's not just the M90. It's an intake manifold and an adapter and injectors and some sort of air inlet, and there's a lot of stuff that goes along with that. White gas is Coleman stove fuel. Were you surprised when Vortec and Paxton merged? I was, given the blower wars that were going on with because the guys that started Vortec worked at Paxton and then started Vortec, and then they obviously were enemies, and then back then the planetary drive Paxton was not as good as the gear driven Vortec. when all of that started out. And then and I when they merged, I'm like, wow, that's kind of crazy. Then one bought the other one, and if you listen to both of them, they're like, no, we bought them, and they're like, no, we bought them, and whatever. But it just made for better products. They're still using both the names, I think, but I think that the blowers are very similar. I don't know what Honda's reason for going reverse rotation. I don't know what the logic behind that is. Camp fuel, like sterno stuff. Is that white gas? They made one over 1,000. Yeah, it did good. It made a lot of power. The Aerotech stuff made a lot of power. Passenger compartment is designed to protect you from crash damage more than any other spot. In a race car? In an older race car? Had a fear with an Iron Duke. The fiber cam gear shredded and left me stranded. I had to tear the engine apart to clean out the debris. Hondas were reverse rotation on some engines for pedal clearance. On their right-hand drive cars, engine would be on the other side. Oh, okay, I see. My mom had a Crossfire 82 that we carved and cammed. I always wanted to blow through it. Best handling string ray to me. Just need more power. In an 82, yeah. An 84 was a really good handling car, especially the Z51. Not sterno, it's clear fuel. Okay. Mitsubishi had engines on the same side as Honda's, but needed an intermediate gear in the transmission to fix the rotation. So you didn't have 5 reverse gears. Yep. Get away, what's going on? Yeah, and then one of the guys that moved over to Vortec, then he left and started Powerdyne. Maybe not in a 917. Yeah, those were. Well, when you tell engineers we want the car to go fast, and you don't tell them we also want the car to be safe, they're like, okay, you gave us one thing, and that's what we're gonna do. It needs to be light. It needs to be fast. Okay. And the driver gets in and goes, hey, like, hey, it goes fast. So one company's product ended up creating two, different products, but yeah, that's not unusual in the automotive industry. 917 had the driver's seat in front of the front wheels too. Yeah. Claims it's fast burning. Okay. So you would need less timing then maybe. My mom had a Crossfire 82 that we carved and cammed. Okay, yeah, that makes more sense. Because 82 Crossfire was still an L83, right? That was before they did it in 84. But I think that the engine was a carryover, right? Before they got TunePort in 85. TunePort. And it jumped up a lot from 205 to 230 horsepower. It was a lot. It was big boy power. Big, crazy power. We never had a poll. We'll just do a quick poll. Okay. Would you choose a 331 stroker Ford over a 347 stroker Ford because of reduced piston wear? And we only got a few minutes, so you better get your answers in. That's right. I said what I said. Do you believe ProCharger is selling a lot of product in 2024, or do you think they are just upping their marketing and sponsor budget? I don't have any way to answer either one of those. There's a 917 driver at Le Mans that crashed and saw his shoe away from the crash site. The problem was that his foot was still in it. Porsche gave him the 917 after fixing it, but not his foot. Did they sew the foot back on? We've got 2 treadmill motors, a pressure washer, engine, some V-belts, and a dream. Good. Make it happen, man. I'm all for it. For the poll, ask if we should have a poll. I believe it still won't be 100%. I know. Isn't the SCI head unit so improved over the old school Vortex that it's hard to argue for the HO kit versus upgrading the entry level kit? I don't know what you mean by old school Vortex. Like, which one are you talking about? Are you talking about an A or B trim? Because an S or an SI, and I don't know if the SCI is probably the self-contained one. A self-contained one would have value over the ones that are not self-contained that require drilling and tapping or punching a hole in the oil pan, just because they're self-contained. So that would be a benefit right away, even if they kept the impeller design and all that the same. But from the very beginning, the B trim with a bigger straight vaned impeller was a big upgrade over the A trim, which is what they started with. And then the R trim made even more power. And then the S trim and the T trim and all the subsequent things after that have all been upgrades in design, which we want, which you expect from a company to improve upon their product. You know, we see that with the guys at Ron Tooley Racing, doing lots of testing on the computer, on their Spintron, on the dyno, you know, at the track, everywhere, and constantly making better versions of their camshafts, the V1, the V2, V3, etc. All of that stuff. And Vortec did all of that. We can't ask if it's a boosted application on a stock block for the poll. Yeah, sure. You could make up whatever you want. I choose a running Ford if I didn't have another option, which is why I drive a 96 Ford. I have no idea about any of the engines you said. A 347 stroker 302 or a 331. It's basically just a change in the stroke length. A 3250 versus a 3400. Great support system, chat people. Yeah, we got the best chat people. Because the chat is where it's at. That's right. The TI trim I really like. That's a good blower. And so is the V1, the SI trim. No, what is their 1,000+ horsepower? Like the Novi 2000 is good, or the 2200 is good, and the YSI. That's what I'm thinking of. I knew I would. It's locked in there somewhere. I just had to go access it. I had to move around a couple things. Almost bought a 912 the other day. It was really rough. The pictures the guy used in the ad were 10 years old. So he had the pretty pictures. Trying to sandbag, trying to catfish you. Hurricane power outer maintenance. Oh, there you go. I've been through a hurricane, and I don't envy people that would get caught out and stuff like that. That's terrible. And all the damage that it does. It's just horrible. I don't know what you mean by thoughts, Alice. Would you choose a 331 stroker Ford over a 347 because of reduced piston wear? 65% are saying no, because we know the 347 is going to make more power because it's bigger. Florida's getting tornadoes because they don't have enough problems already. Are they Sharknadoes or Pythonnadoes? One more minute. I'm in Ohio, and the weather here has been crap from the hurricane. I know I need to go pick up my Omni. Hello, I like 331 for the street and 347 for racing. There you go. Microburst wins, yep. Not bueno. Piranhanados and Meglanados, Gatornados. That's it. All of it. For your personal car, would you choose a twin screw for $2,000 more than a Vortec? I can't consider stuff that's that expensive anyways, so that's not for me. Lizardnados and Bugnados, yeah. Arachnados, that's good. I like that. Get points for that. Can you, Tim? Can you do a Magnuson or a TVS or something like that? Really windy. We lost a big branch in our backyard. It took out one of our bushes when it fell, and then also took out a sprinkler. And then I found out that the previous owner had he had really, because like when you do sprinklers out of PVC, you know, they're threaded and they screw in, and then that way if they break off, you just use a tool and you unscrew it and you put another threaded deal in there. It's all good. Well, this was a lot more problematic than that. It could have been really easy. They don't have to be like you don't have to use the 2-part like glue and epoxy to seal all that stuff in there. Sprinkler systems are not designed to be permanent. Stuff is going to happen. You're going to knock sprinkler heads off. Stuff is going to break. People are going to hit them with lawnmowers. All of that stuff is going to happen. You have to know that going in. And so you have to make it serviceable, and you make it serviceable so that it's easy as possible to do. If you can't take your little easy out tool for PVC stuff and get it out, it's way too tight. It shouldn't be like that. Cutlass is in the garage. Not in current setup, is just asking for someone with more experience. New Whipples do neither. Hard to beat a twin screw. Put the right BOV on a centrifugal is nice. Solutions for maintaining. Ralph, what is it? Oh, microbursts, okay. 331 and put 5.4 badges in place of the 5.0 badges to mess with the mod motor people. There you go. That's good. My stock BOV with the Paxton was pretty boring. Yeah, it doesn't do the like good noise. You need to put a whistler or something on it so that it really makes a good noise. I'd have to say that not just Whipple, because that's not the only positive displacement blower, but a Kenny Bell, a Whipple, both are twin screws. And then even a positive displacement like a TVS is a good blower. And the thing that you get with those is, and that includes Edelbrock and all these people that are using them, you get immediate boost response, which is good because you have, you know, immediate torque and it's fun. You get to enjoy it, and you get to enjoy it without like revving the thing all the way out. It's like, you know, you have a cam and it's best at 7,000 RPM where it's making peak power. But in the range that you're getting, you know, get a jam onto the freeway or whatever you're doing, you spend a lot more time from 2,000 to 5,000 than you do from 5,000 to 7,000. And so the positive displacement blowers are a lot more fun in that range. John, happy to help. And on that note, it's time to go. Come on, you can't keep me here all day. I got videos to do. Would you choose a 331 stroker over a 347? 68% saying no. We want the big boy. Time management. Twin screw for low end power for daily driver is more reasonable. Yeah, but again, you have to look at the cost. Well, like, what is the cost? And on that note, it is time to go. But I'll be back tonight. Tonight. Whoa.